we've built AI to make scan faster. We've built AI to make radiology interpretation faster. And we've built AI to essentially automate internal processes. That has led into decreased costs for us. And then we passed all of those cost savings to consumers.
Welcome back to the Fitt Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Benary. Today I'm joined by Emi Gal, founder and CEO of Ezra. In this episode, we talk about using AI in whole body scans to detect cancer. Emi explains why preventative MRIs are discouraged and how Ezra is shifting the status quo. Plus, we discuss rising cancer rates, using AI to lower the cost of scans, and Emi's biohacking experiments. Let's get into it. Today's episode is brought to you by EGYM. EGYM provides fitness and health facilities with smart workout solutions built on its ecosystem of hardware, software, and partners. But it's more than cool tech. Their connected training experience delivers business results while helping members reach their wellness goals. If you run a gym, health club, YMCA, or any kind of fitness facility, you should check them out. Visit egym.com to learn more. Hi, Emi. Welcome to Fitt Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, from the top, just kind of jumping into it, it would be great to get the background on Ezra, your background as well, and we'll kick it off from there.
Amazing. Yeah. So a bit about my background before I jump into Ezra. So I'm originally from Romania, studied applied mathematics and computer science in school. And I kind of lucked out that my favorite topic in math was linear algebra, which was a lucky thing because it became kind of the foundation for machine learning and deep learning. And so I started a machine learning company in college in a very different space than Ezra, in the advertising technology space. Built one of the first video ad servers on the internet using some kind of very nascent machine learning to deliver better ads online. Turned out to be a good idea at the time. Became the largest video ad server in Europe and was acquired by a big ad tech company in New York. And that's how I ended up in the US. And then I started Ezra because I'm personally at high risk for cancer, for melanoma. I have over 200 moles on my body. It puts me in the highest risk bracket for skin cancer. And I've had cancer in my family. Sadly, my mother passed away from cancer because she found cancer late. And so that got me really interested in the space and realized that we have a cure for cancer. It's early detection. We're just not able to find cancer early for everyone. And that's the problem we're trying to solve at Ezra.
Yeah, and of course, you all do that through full body scans, imaging, using AI to then assess the kind of results. Can you just talk about what that maybe process looks like, how you arrived at that solution from a prevention standpoint and where it currently stands today?
Yeah, so our solution at Ezra is this full body MRI that our fastest, most affordable scan is 30 minutes, just over $1,000, screens for cancer in 13 organs, and is powered by a number of AIs that we can dive into. I actually spent a good 18 months to 2 years doing research in order to land on a full body MRI as the solution for early detection. And I actually cycled through a dozen ideas or so on how you could go about finding cancer early. And I went from liquid biopsies to DNA-based nanobots that you could put in the bloodstream to all sorts of other crazy ideas. And I kind of took a first principles approach where I would just have an idea, research it, speak with scientists and so on. And 11 times it was shut down by scientists generally because they would be like, hey, this is not possible. It's going to be too expensive, or the accuracy is not going to be good enough, or whatnot. And then actually on my honeymoon, I was reading a paper that was comparing MRI with CT and ultrasound, a bunch of other imaging modalities in terms of sensitivity and specificity, so accuracy for finding cancer early. And the paper was concluding overwhelmingly that full body MRIs, or that MRI, is like an incredible modality for finding cancer early. So I turned to my wife. We were like on these sunbeds on the beach, and I was like, hey, if you could do a full body MRI, less than an hour, relatively affordable, to screen for cancer everywhere in the body, would you do it? And she said, yes. That's how Ezra was born. And so what we do is we offer this full body MRI that screens for cancer and 500 other diseases everywhere in the body. And what makes us really unique is that we're possibly the only company that has deployed AIs at every step of the screening process in order to make the scan more affordable.
And one thing is, you think about cancer screening, prevention, and now whole body MRIs and a host of other diagnostics that are coming to market. Why is this such a controversial thing? I can't quite, I understand of course, I've dug into it. I've read the research, and there's all pushback in terms of downstream costs and unnecessary treatment and what we incur in terms of like stressing about it. Like, and there seems to be a lot of rational like considerations, but just in general, there's like a huge opposition to the idea of whole body MRI. Why is that the case?
Yeah, so the by far the biggest concern, and it's to a certain degree not an unfounded concern that a corner of the medical community has, is that full body MRIs are going to lead to overdiagnosis and incidental findings and biopsies and anxiety and all sorts of downstream follow-up procedures that will have a negative impact on one's health. And whilst that is a valid concern, if you do full body MRIs correctly, you don't have those downstream kind of follow-up procedures done because you just don't need to. And so the correctly part is important. And so that correctly part has three parts. One, you need a full body protocol that delivers diagnostic level images. So the Ezra scan, for example, if you take our prostate exam or prostate MRI and compare it with a typical prostate MRI, it will be as good, if not better, image quality. And so it's kind of the image quality of the scan needs to be really, really high in order to minimize the unnecessary potential follow-ups just because you didn't have enough data to be able to do a proper assessment. That's number one. Number two is we use AI at Ezra to take every single finding in a radiology report and rank it on a score of 1 to 5. We call it an E-score that determines whether the finding is potentially cancerous or not. And so we modeled this on something called the RAD system from the American College of Radiology, where they have PI-RADS for prostate, BI-RADS for breast, lung-RADS for lung, and so on. We just took it and expanded it to the entire body and called it an E-score. And so this AI allows us to rank every single finding 1 to 5 in order to determine whether it is malignant, potentially malignant or not. And then we only recommend follow-up on the high score, so E-score 4 and 5. The third thing we do is, instead of sending people for like biopsies or diagnostic stuff, we recommend follow-up scan, either immediately another scan with contrast or longitudinal monitoring with imaging, with a scan over time. In doing these three things, we've decreased potential false positives quite significantly. And at some point this year, we'll be publishing a study on what the results look like. But it's looking very promising and actually probably better than most other screening procedures in terms of specificity, which is the measure of false positives.
Yeah, it's like I said, it was obviously you can see rationally why that makes sense. And then there seems to be from the kind of medical establishment, like you mentioned like a corner of the system or maybe a certain cohort within it that comes out very vehemently opposed to the idea in general. And not being from the space, the kind of medical space, leads down the path of like medical paternalism, where there's like this almost like objection to people having more agency, more information, access to data. Do you think of it as part of like that broader issue, or is this more just, hey, the concern that we want to avoid these unnecessary kind of treatments?
Yeah, so there's the very technical concern that I would just address, right? They're concerned about kind of incidental findings in these MRI scans, but there's also what you just said, which is kind of a healthcare in the past was a type of sick care where if you had a problem, you would go to the doctor and the doctor would just tell you what to do. And I think we are moving away from that into a proactive healthcare where you are the owner of your health and you make decisions about your health, and then you leverage doctors to make better decisions. But it's not the doctors that tell you what to do, it's the other way around. And so Eric Topol wrote a really good book some years ago called The Patient Will See You Now, where he gave this, what I thought was a really good analogy, which is that as an individual, you are the CEO of your health. And at most, doctors are your COOs and your VPs who are kind of supporting you on your health journey. And so Ezra is part of this kind of wave of companies that is empowering people with data and with metrics and with agency so that they can make better decisions about their health. And I'm really excited because at Ezra, we have helped thousands of people find cancer and other types of things that have changed their life for the better. And so I'm excited about all of the companies in this space and beyond that are helping people live healthier, longer lives.
Obviously, part of your motivation for doing this and Ezra trying to shift things in this direction of prevention and screenings and diagnostics. And in general, that's not the case for cancer. It's very much just kind of wait and see and hope for the best. Obviously, you do all the things in terms of lifestyle behaviors and choices and all those things that set you up to not have cancer. But, like you, I lost a parent to cancer. My younger brother has had cancer and, has fortunately to this point been able to, beat it and hopefully continue to go down that path. But still myself sitting in this, it's like, what am I supposed to do? Like, what do I do? And maybe I guess the question is, why isn't prevention something that is discussed or mainstream in terms of how we approach it?
Yeah, so I think because the incentives are not there to encourage that, right? It's kind of like, again, the health system is structured really well to treat people for cancer, but it's not structured really well to help people prevent cancer or detect cancer early. And when it comes specifically to cancer, early detection is what makes the difference between life and death. Like if you look at the data, only 2 out of 10 people with late stage cancer survive longer than 5 years, so about 20%, lower actually for some organs. More than 8 out of 10, so 80%, survive cancer if they find cancer early. So clearly, kind of the way to beat cancer is to find it early. The problem is that you can only find cancer early in 6 organs in the body. Take breast, colon, skin, lung, uterus, and prostate cancer. They have screening procedures. Everything else, there's no screening procedure. So if you're unlucky enough to get a brain tumor or pancreatic cancer or liver cancer or gallbladder, etc., you will find out when you're symptomatic. If you're symptomatic, it's generally too late. And so what we're trying to do is to move the detection rate to prior to becoming symptomatic, because the insidious thing about cancer is you can be vegan, athlete, 25 and still get cancer. And that's because, it's a genetic disease. You can get unlucky. You can have a series of genetic mutations that lead to an oncogene, that lead to a tumor, that lead to cancer, that lead to, detecting it too late. And so early detection is the best defense against cancer. Before Ezra, there were no easy, affordable, fast ways to find cancer everywhere.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about the process and using the whole body MRI, but in terms of now coming to market and opening locations and getting people in the door, what does maybe like the kind of the business of that look like in terms of how you envision access to this and in terms of how you're, I don't know if acquiring customers is the right way to put it, but getting patients seen and hopefully, preventing more cancer? Like, what does the operation actually look like?
Yeah, so our vision for the company from day one was that we wanted to build a kind of high-end scan. That was our original 60-minute full body, $2,000. Build success with that to launch a more affordable scan, which we launched last year, launched at $1,000, just over 30-minute full body. And then use the success of that to launch a $500, 10 to 15-minute full body MRI that is then reimbursed by payers, by employers, and so that anyone can do it. And we're kind of midway through that journey. And so within about 2 years, we think we're going to get to a 10 to 15 minute full body scan that can find cancer everywhere on the body that's priced at $500-$600. And so because of that vision, we took an approach where we wanted to invest in software and AI and not in imaging facilities and kind of building retail locations and so on. We wanted to become the best at software and AI so that we can invest in this kind of decrease in cost and leverage existing infrastructure and existing facilities to actually scan people. So the way Ezra works is we go and we partner with imaging facilities that exist, that already have scanners. These are American College of Radiology accredited facilities. We have partnered with RadNet, which is the largest in the country, Reyes, which is the second largest in the country, and SimonMed, which is the third largest. They're all kind of imaging partners to Ezra and many others. And we're live in about 10 cities, about 30 facilities. And this year we're launching another 10 cities, another 30 facilities. And so by partnering with existing imaging facilities, we have the ability to expand very quickly. And we have the ability to offer this kind of very affordable scan that's just going to trend down in terms of cost, because the broader we get, the more AIs we build, the cheaper the costs we have, and we're passing those cost savings to consumers.
Yeah, there's, I think, two things I want to talk about there. One, and so I'm understanding it correctly, and so the listeners are, the kind of, you think about it, innovation, so to speak, is the actual interpretation, the AI, you reading the results, and that's what's lowering the cost. Is that correct?
So actually, this brings us back to talking about the 3 different AIs that we've deployed at Ezra that have enabled us to offer this kind of super affordable scan. So we leverage AI at every step of the screening process. The scan itself, we have an AI that's called Ezra Flash that is enabling us to acquire MRI images much faster and then enhance their quality in order to bring them up to a quality that you would get if the scan would be done in a much longer time. So Ezra Flash enables us to acquire faster MRI images without compromising on image quality. That's AI number 1. It's FDA cleared in production. Once the scan has been done, it goes to radiologists. When radiologists analyze the scan, they use something called Ezra Assist. This was originally cleared for prostate, and we're kind of expanding it to other organs in the body. And the Ezra Assist AI is designed to not replace radiologists, but make them faster by automating a number of the things that they need to do manually, such as kind of measuring the size of a lesion or an organ, or segmenting the prostate, or kind of making annotations. Those can be automated using AI. And then the radiology report is generated by the radiologist, supported by Ezra Assist. And then we take the radiology report and we pass it through something called Ezra Reporter, which converts radiology reports into plain English. You've seen radiology reports, they're quite technical. You need to go and you can Google terms and so on. What we do is we automatically translate everything in plain English, and then we have a team of doctors that review the report and then ship it to members. So we've built AI to make scan faster. We've built AI to make radiology interpretation faster, and we've built AI to essentially automate internal processes. That has led into decreased costs for us, and then we passed all of those cost savings to consumers.
And then you mentioned there the cost piece, which is, of course, kind of the thought process is, yes, maybe at first it might be expensive, and we can argue is $2,000 and it's paying out of pocket. Who has access to that is also kind of a criticism. But the whole idea being, look, over time, we want to make it more affordable so that more people can have it. And really, by innovating on this at kind of every step of the way, that's how it gets there. That's how any technology gets to mass market. So when you think about that, and maybe, I don't know if you confronted that, but in general, like, the idea gets that pushback of it's too expensive and it's only for the rich, and most people can't afford it. Like, is that the kind of go-to response? Like, look, this is how we get it to more people.
Yeah, so fortunately, that's not for Ezra. Like, I think some other companies in the space have gotten that criticism because of the kind of approach they took to market. For us, from day one, we put up a blog post that was very similar to the Tesla blog post. And we said, hey, we're going to start with a $2,000 scan. We're going to use the success of that to build a $1,000 scan. We're going to use the success of that to build a $500 scan. And our goal is to just build better and better AIs, better technology, so that more people can afford this scan. And so we were very deliberate about our pursuit. And I think that has gotten the market to be like, okay, well, Ezra is $2,000, but they're working towards this $500 scan. And I think the market started becoming convinced that we're going to get there when we launched our Ezra Flash scan, which is, $1,350, 30 minutes. People can start seeing how we can get that to 15 minutes and a much more affordable price. And so I think some people in the industry got a bit of criticism around that. It hasn't really applied to us because of how deliberate we've been about communicating our vision.
There's also and you've kind of alluded to it so far, and I also, believe this as well, that, the healthcare industry as it currently works is broken. It's more sick care. We wait to treat people. It's reactive. And obviously you're taking a certain approach to, solving that, creating a new path. There's also the reality of, at different points in time in the process, you have to interface. You kind of have to work within the existing infrastructure when people are getting treatment. And so there's this kind of back and forth of like, are we creating an entirely disrupting an industry? Are we creating a new path? What does the future look like? But oh, by the way, we still have to seek treatment, and the radiologist and everything else still functions within this old system. How do you think about like the future? I know that's a broad and maybe exaggerated, but like the future of healthcare and what that looks like in terms of maybe disrupting it or innovating on it.
So I'm a big believer in trying to align incentives for as much as you can. And so the nice thing about Ezra is that when you take a step back and you kind of start thinking about what if it works, what if like we solve the incidentals, what if we solve the cost, what if those things work, what can the future look like, and are the kind of incentives for the different stakeholders aligned? Well, if you think about early cancer detection, right? Consumers love it because they get to live longer and healthier if they find cancer early. So incentives are aligned there. Physicians love it because their patients now have a shot at life. Payers love it because they can improve outcomes while decreasing costs, which is a very rare thing to be able to do in a health system. And then health systems love it because treating a patient with surgery is so much easier, better, faster, cheaper than treating a patient with chemotherapy and radiotherapy and immunotherapy and so on. So provided that we can actually deliver this high sensitivity, high specificity, low cost full body scan that can find cancer early everywhere in the body, everybody wins in the system. Consumers, payers, health systems, physicians. It's a very rare thing for all of those things to align. And so I think we are disruptive in that we're bringing something very new to the market that is able to do things that were not possible before. Once everyone kind of understands that it actually does work, I think the whole industry will kind of align with it as a useful tool in a physician's arsenal in order to help people live longer. And there's precedent for it. There's low dose CT, mammograms with breast, skin dermatology checks. All of those things work really, really well, and they help people find cancer early. And so we're just adding one more tool that can be used by physicians for this purpose.
The Fitt Insider Podcast is brought to you by our friends at EGYM. This is an exciting partnership for us, and not just because EGYM makes some of the most innovative fitness products out there, but because the entire EGYM team, led by their CEO Philip, is committed to making health, fitness, and well-being more accessible for everyone. And that's a mission we can get behind. By combining their smart equipment with integrated software and hundreds of connected partner brands, EGYM helps fitness facilities stand out by delivering a personalized, gamified workout experience that improves outcomes and member engagement. So if you're a gym or health club operator thinking about how to best serve your members while driving business results, go see what EGYM is up to at egym.com. We've talked about, screenings and prevention and basically creating a new way to think about cancer, not just wait and hope for the best. But at the same time, we're at this time in society, culture, where cancer rates are going up, especially among young people, obviously from an Ezra perspective, it's like, yes, and we want to help and we want to catch this earlier and give people a better chance at fighting it and getting treatment. But where do you sit with just like the what's happening that is causing this, and what do we do about it beyond, yes, we want to catch it early and treat it, but just like this is a bigger problem than that.
Yeah, it's very worrying actually. We at Ezra scan many people who are young, so like in their 30s, and we find cancers. And these are individuals who statistically should not have cancer. And so it's clear that there's like the rate of cancer in earlier and younger people is rising. And so I think a lot to do with it is lifestyle factors. So kind of, red meat is a clear contributor to colon and other gastric cancers. There might be something to say about water and plastics and those kind of influencing certain pathways in the body that then lead to oncogenes that then lead to cancer. So I do think that people's lifestyles have changed slightly for the worst, like processed foods, processed meats, and so on. And therefore, aside from trying to find cancer early, we need to invest in helping people understand what they should do in order to prevent cancer. And really, there are three things there that are essential that help. One is exercise. Two is diet. And so like exercise, what I mean is kind of vigorous exercise, cardiovascular, HIIT, weightlifting, whatever it is, just something, right? Two is diet. And what I mean there is essentially the simple rule is not eating from the aisles. If you just avoid eating from the aisles and just eat from, not the aisles. So kind of whole foods that are fresh. That's 90% of what you can do in order to kind of improve your diet to an extent where you'll just decrease your risk for cancer. And then the third thing, and this is kind of an obvious one, but I'm still surprised walking around New York seeing so many people do it, is don't smoke. Smoking is the biggest contributor to cancer deaths, not just lung, but like many other organs are impacted by smoking. And so it's kind of people who smoke, are put themselves at a significantly higher risk of developing cancer. And so that alone can like be a huge influencer in how long someone lives.
It's so important, all those things. And it's actually something, changing gears a little bit, I wanted to talk to you about, because I know you have a personal interest in kind of self-experimentation, biohacking, and at the same time we have a lot of new direct to consumer or within kind of medical establishment prevention, diagnostics, now health wearables and biohacking, all these things kind of coming together. And on one hand, I kind of go back and forth with this because I'm a former athlete, try to stay healthy, work out, eat well, do all those things. And it's like on one hand, we have more access to information and information in terms of education and knowledge, awareness, but also health data. And we're still seeing, like you talked about, people are still walking around smoking. And there's also a number of health ailments and chronic conditions and obesity, all these things. And it's like, are we getting better with like the more technology, or like where are we not connecting the dots?
Yeah, so I do a lot of biohacking and a lot of experimentation on my body, and it's kind of it came from the fact that I was getting these kind of really bad headaches, and I started on a kind of path to investigate them, and so for the past 8 years, 10 years now, I've just been tracking about 150 biomarkers about my body, from blood tests to MRI scans, DEXA scans, body measurements, and so on. And actually, just as a side note, concluded that the biggest contributor to my headaches is stress. And so, luckily, I had no significant issues, but like, and stress is very hard to control for. Therefore, I get a lot of headaches still. But it took me quite a while to narrow in on that as the main reason why I was getting these headaches. Closing the side note there. I think going back to your question, where's the disconnect between, hey, we have all these technologies, we have a lot of knowledge and so on. Why are we still seeing a lot of people who are overweight, obese, smoking, and so on? I think the unfortunate reality is that it is significantly harder to do all of the things that I do than it is to just go to McDonald's and get a burger and then, buy a pack of cigarettes when you're stressed and so on. And so I think it's unfortunately much harder and much more expensive to be healthy than it is to be unhealthy. And so the education is important, the data is important, but I think it's a bit of a systemic issue, especially in the US. And so if you go to a lot of parts of America, people just don't have affordable ways to get access to high quality, non-processed foods. And therefore they reach for the things that are affordable and available. And that leads to a host of downstream health issues such as, overweight, obesity, diabetes, cancer. I can't think of a easy solution to that problem. Unfortunately, it probably will require some form of taxation in the future, as like we did with cigarettes, we should do with sugar and processed foods, and that might help, kind of realign incentives.
Yeah, I think thinking back to earlier in the conversation where you spoke about incentives and trying to align everything in a way that makes, Ezra and this type of approach prevention. Then there's that whole other leap to say from sedentary behaviors to processed foods, big food, pharma. It's like we then have to go down that list and try to then align all those incentives where they're working in opposition. In some cases, it's not as simple as it appears to be on the surface, for sure.
Correct. Yeah. And, there also hasn't been data to be able to say, hey, there's a direct correlation between better access to foods and so on and better health. And obviously, it's an obvious statement, but like when you're going to various different bodies to try to change things, you need to show data. And actually, one of our investors is Esther Dyson, who's kind of a renowned angel investor. And Esther, for the past decade, has been running a nonprofit project called Way to Wellville, where she has gone into communities that are kind of the type of communities that wouldn't normally have access to high quality food and so on. And she's brought in investment and education programs and so on in order to change behavior and change access. And next year is going to be 10 years. And Esther now has a lot of data to show that actually better access and better education leads to significantly better outcomes in terms of health for these communities.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned it there a little bit that you kind of figured out that your headaches were caused by stress. You actually, and I think it was maybe even before, or maybe at about the same time you were starting Ezra, I actually came across your website and your blog where you talk quite a bit about what you're tracking and what the results are and all those sorts of things. So if people want to check that out, we'll include the website in the show notes. But going down that path, what has that whole process and continue to be like for you, where you start to get this understanding of like, oh, I control the inputs, I can impact the outcome, this, and then I'm sure, and I do this in some ways too, not to the extent that you do, but oh, this really isn't as kind of secret or unknown as we are led to believe that it is. So maybe just can you talk about that experience for you and why that's become something that you continue to do?
For sure. So actually, two very important observations there. One is related to what you just said, which is part of why I do all these experiments is to figure out what's the 80-20 distribution of the things that will get you the most value. And so actually on my blog, emigal.com/longevity guide, I have posted the distillation of all of my experiments in kind of 4 or 5 different blog posts around exercise, supplements, testing, diet. And I've kind of tried to distill what are the 20% things that will lead to 80% of the results. So that's number one. And kind of there's some people who are even more extreme than me. So like a friend of mine is Brian Johnson. He does he's on the very, very, very extreme end of things, but he too does it and publishes everything in order to show what works and what doesn't, so that people can then just do the 20%. The second thing that I've learned is essential for if you're really trying to optimize is that there's no kind of one recipe that works for everyone. You need to kind of experiment. You need to run these kind of N of one experiments. So there's some basic things that you can do that will lead you most of the way, but for the final optimizations, they will be very, very personal, and what works for you might not work for me, and vice versa, and so on. And that's where I'm a huge proponent of N of one experiments. So at any moment in time, I'm actually running an experiment where I'm doing testing, experiment, testing. For example, right now I'm optimizing testosterone, and there's some research to show that fenugreek improves testosterone. And so for the past month, I did blood tests for my testosterone. I took fenugreek for a month, according to the research, and then I did blood tests again. And in my case, fenugreek improved testosterone by 4 points. So it wasn't like a huge improvement. The improvement was higher in other groups in the research. Maybe I already had pretty good testosterone, so like maybe that's why it hasn't made that much of an impact for me. But that's an example on how you can test things on yourself in order to figure out what works and what doesn't for you.
I think that is something when people, because now obviously Brian Johnson has brought this very much in the mainstream, and you see the headlines, it's he spends X millions of dollars a year on all the different things. And of course there is the kind of TLDR, right? The 20% of like, if you were to do anything, like do this. And all those things tend to be very common sense, like that we kind of talked about, the very pillar things. But then for people who do try whatever experiment it might be, it's like that testing part sometimes gets overlooked. It's you're trying whatever the input is, you're trying whatever the supplement is or the protocol is, like, then against what? Against the blood test, against the check-in. So not exactly a question there, but I just found it interesting as well. Like, because again, I do a lot of the similar things myself. And it's like, yeah, that's the whole key to it is, are we tracking that progress and coming back to that checkpoint to see what the outcome is?
Absolutely. No, I'm actually very happy you reiterated that, because it's a lot of people don't appreciate how important it is to know what you're optimizing for, measure it prior to an experiment, measure it after an experiment, and make sure that you're not confounding the experiments. Like if I started 2 supplements at the same time, at the end of the month, if my testosterone improved, which supplement caused that? Was it fenugreek or was it, garlic? And so you wouldn't know. And that's why kind of you need to isolate the thing that you're going to do. You do it, then you test before and after, and that kind of gives you data that you can iterate on. And I've actually minutely documented all of these experiments over the years. And so I have a good body of data that is applied to me that tells me whether something is likely to work or not.
Maybe a couple more questions before we wrap up. One related to this. Do you think it's too much to put the onus on individuals to, let's say, do this type of experimentation or have that type of agency? Or because we did, even putting aside maybe the access or the cost of it, but just understanding, like looking at the data, running the experiments, and do we want that kind of future where it is, hey, now it's on you, the individual, to like go ahead and figure it out?
Yeah. So honestly, I don't think it's necessary. I think the vast majority of people would benefit from those just 20% things that are kind of very obvious things. Exercise, eat good food, mostly veggies, not too much. Don't smoke. Take a bunch of supplements. That's it. Really, get screened for cancer and test it. The some blood tests. And so if you do those things, you will have added a few years to your lifespan. It's kind of like it's as easy as that. If you want to add a decade to your lifespan, I think it's possible, but I think you then need to take a very, very methodical approach to figure out how to extract more for you. And your genotype and your phenotype will then start influencing things. So, the type of exercise that makes sense for Joe with fast twitch muscles might be very different than Emi with slow twitch muscles. So I might want to do more resistance. You might want to do more sprints. And it's kind of, you just start understanding your particular body better in order to then know what needs to be optimized in your case. But for 90% of people, they would just add some years to their life if they just did the kind of four standard things that are now well established as, that we know they work. There's no doubt that they work.
And then coming back to Ezra, we talked a lot about cancer. We talked about a lot of other things too, in terms of prevention and lifestyle chronic disease optimization. And obviously, with the scans, you're checking for a lot of other things beyond cancer. So, how do you think about what all that will encompass, how the kind of platform will evolve, and maybe even just like what the future of Ezra looks like?
Three things to unpack there. Number one is we do find 500 other conditions that are not cancer that could impact your health. So a good friend of mine in the very first Ezra scan, which was like 2019, found significant fatty liver disease. And this is like at the time he was like 32, and it had a third of his liver content was fat, so really, really bad. He changed his entire diet, lifestyle, and so on. And fast forward 4 years, he has no more fatty liver disease. And it's all through just diet and workouts, etc. So we find a lot of other things in the Ezra scan that could impact your health that are not cancer. So it's kind of a really important thing to do. The second thing that we really, I think, do very well at Ezra is longitudinal monitoring. So if you get Ezra scans every year or every other year or whatnot, every single scan will give us more data about your body, which then influence the analysis of the current scan in order to do a better job identifying things really, really early. And so I'm a big believer in just longitudinally monitoring your body over time with data. And Ezra, I think, is kind of the best at the imaging component of that data. Obviously, you should do blood tests, you should do other things. So that kind of answers the what are the things in Ezra scan and kind of how do we look at the near future. In the medium to long-term future, we're big believers at Ezra of a continuous monitoring of your health. And so if you think of imaging, right now it's done episodically, right? So you once a year or twice a year, you go into a facility, you get a scan, you leave, and then a year later you get another scan. I do believe in the future, we will be able to incorporate other types of data into this, such as your sensors from your different devices. And maybe there's a heat sensor in your bed from your 8 sleep mattress and so on, and incorporate that data into our models in order to do a better job at monitoring your body over time. Obviously, a heat sensor in your 8 sleep mattress on its own will not tell you much about cancer. But if you incorporate that into the high resolution Ezra full body abstraction of data, then it becomes a much more interesting data point to be able to measure things over time. So really, really excited about the concept of bringing imaging outside of the scanner in kind of on a 5-year plus horizon.
Do you think about it that way too, like a digital twin, continuous monitoring kind of prediction type of approach, or just integrating that more so into like this digital checkup, so to speak?
I think the former. So, we already monitor you longitudinally over time with your episodic kind of Ezra scans, but we're not too far from having the ability to incorporate other data points into that whole digital twin in order to be able to monitor you continuously over time. And I think we at Ezra took an approach that was very sensible, which is that we'll be able to do this by incorporating any and all data. We don't need to have kind of specialized hardware or specialized our own facilities and so on. We can just by being the software and AI layer that's ingesting this data, we think we'll be able to just gain insights from the continuous assessment of the different data points. Right now, these data points are our own scans, but in the future, they could be other things as well.
Yeah, certainly. I think everything we talked about today, this idea of prevention and taking ownership and at least having awareness of our health, yeah, certainly appeals to me. I'm sure it appeals to a lot of listeners as well. Where would you point them to learn more? To the website, find where a clinic is, those sorts of things.
Yeah. So more about Ezra at Ezra.com. They can book a scan and Ezra.com/locations to see all of the different locations we have.
Perfect. And your website as well, which we mentioned and we'll link up to if they want to just check out some of the experiments and see what has worked and get the 20%, right? That they can begin to implement immediately.
And I have all these guides and templates and spreadsheets and stuff. So I kind of try to make it easy for folks to get started.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm excited to share the conversation and grateful for the time.
Thank you, Joe. This was great.
One more thing before you head out. Help us spread the word. Take a minute to rate and review the podcast, subscribe to the YouTube channel, or share this episode with a friend. And if you like conversations like this, you'll love the Fitt Insider newsletter. We send it every Tuesday. The link is in the description. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you back here next week.